Next, we're going to look at two slightly more complicated wordings. Now, one interesting thing about Greek is that you have verbals and nominals as the two major types of word. And those major types of word make the two major types of unit that I've just shown you, phrases and clauses. But there's another type of word called a participle. And the way you can think about this is that a participle participates in both the nominal and the verbal categories. It is basically a verbal, as I write here, wrapped up in a nominal. So it's a process, something like do, but it's wrapped up in a nominal, which means the ending of it signals that, you're supposed to take this as a thing. So in this case, we have this participle, poion, and poieo is a verbal, means to do. But poion, it's wrapped up in this nominal ending, and it means doing. So you can actually have an article on the front that says the doing. So the way you might gloss this phrase right here, you might say all the doing the righteousness, or everyone doing righteousness, or all who do righteousness, or everyone who does righteousness. The whole idea is that you've got a process in there, which is, this kind of doing righteousness thing. And that's like a clause, but it's wrapped up in a nominal, which is this ending. So instead of saying do, you say doing. So when you have participles, they have these case relationships that we saw with nominals. So this one, it's a nominative case, and this one's accusative case. The tein dikaiosune, I should say, is accusative case. And there's a process in here, but it functions as a nominal. So you have the doing the righteousness. The doing of righteousness, you could say, is the nominal group here. And then you have everyone who does righteousness. Or you could say, you might think this could be all doing of righteousness. But it's hard to tell without more context. Now, what I want to point out especially, and this is most helpful for 1 John, is that you have this own ending on a process. Poieo is the process. Poion, that's doing, not just to do, but doing. Not just he does or she does or we do or they do, but it's just doing. It's a nominalization, you could say. It's turning a process into a nominal. And this ending is very common for this kind of construction. There's a whole bunch of them in 1 John. You have everyone who says, everyone who does, everyone who hates, all kinds of things like that. And they all end with this own ending. So that's just going to be a helpful clue as you begin reading through that. That was a pattern I recognized very early when I first started learning Greek. I started reading 1 John on Christmas break in my first year. And I started going through it, and I kept seeing this own ending. And so what I did was I looked in the English translation, and it said doing or saying or something like that, for depending on which word it was. And I started seeing a bunch of them, and I thought, okay, well, every time I see that now, where I have this ha article with the own ending, well, I'm just going to say the ing form of that verb, and that's how I'll make sense of it. And turns out that was exactly the right thing to do. And so that's going to be a helpful strategy for you. And what's going on is you have whatever the word is, like, poio, it's ending with some kind of vowel, and then there's this new tau that's added on, and then a sigma. And you remember how I mentioned earlier that new tau and sigma don't really like to go together, and so the tau and the sigma drop off. You have compensatory lengthening of the omicron to become an omega, and that's the own ending that you see. Now, you don't have to memorize that. You don't have to know all of that. What you have to do is just say, oh, there's a thing called a participle. It's when a verbal is wrapped up in a nominal. And I just have to gloss it with the ing ending. The doing, the saying, the thinking, the loving, whatever it might be. So let's look at an example here. Whenever you're looking at a participle, you're looking at a verb, a verbal stem. That verbal stem is going to have a participle morpheme. That means a little marker that shows you it's a participle. And then it's going to have a case ending, just like on a nominal. That's why you can think about a participle as a verb wrapped up in a nominal. It's got a nominal ending on the verb. And you can think of the participle morpheme as kind of like the glue that holds the two together. It holds the verbal stem and the nominal ending together. So in this example, we have the verbal stem lego, and that means say or speak. And we have the participle morpheme right here, new tau. And so together what that gives us is legant. Legant. Now if we were going to add a case ending to that, whether it's nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, singular or plural, you can tell which declension this is going to follow, because what does this word currently end with? It ends with the tau. That means it ends in a consonant. And nominals that end in consonants are third declension. Remember, if they end in an omicron, they're first declension. If they end in an alpha or eta, they're second declension. And if they end in a consonant, they're third declension. So if we're to look at the case endings, if you remember this paradigm, we're going to be interested in the last two columns. So let's say this was going to be a genitive singular neuter. Then the ending we would select is the genitive singular neuter ending. And so that's what we would be adding on right here to the end of legant. And so that would be our entire participle, legantos. And the way you would gloss that, remember, is you take the verb, which in this case means say, and you add the ing ending. That's the best way to start. So this would be something like saying.